Good day, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. This is the fourth talk of Full Circle, which was supposed to be happening tomorrow in conjunction with our 50th anniversary party, but due to coronavirus, we had to reschedule, and we decided to take all the talks online. So this is the fourth webinar that we've done this week. We've got our final one tomorrow, and it's a real pleasure to have you here, so thank you very much. My name's Henry Clifford. I'm a senior coffee trader at DR Wakefield. And today we have the pleasure of hosting Sébastien Lafaye from Costa Rica. He has over 2 decades of experience working in the Costa Rican coffee industry, so he's a very knowledgeable guy. And he's going to talk to us today about sustainability in Costa Rica. And he's going to touch on a lot of really interesting points. So throughout the presentation, you can actually, for those of you that haven't used the webinar function yet, on the right hand of your screen, it's called a control panel. And there's like a question row. And if you type your questions in there, they'll come into me. And afterwards, when we do a live Q&A, I'll be asking Sébastien your questions. I'm also going to be trying a poll function, which should push a couple of questions your way, which I thought might guide the questions and answers. So watch out for that on your control panel. If you see something flashing up, that'll be that. So without further ado, Sébastien, welcome to Full Circle. And I'm now going to share, I'm going to disappear and share your presentation. If you just give me 1 second. Okay. Can you see that, Sébastien?
Yep, yeah, I can see it clearly.
Okay, so I'm handing the mic over to you, sir.
Thank you so well. Good afternoon, everybody. I mean, it's a pleasure to be online. I was supposed to be in England and being in Europe. So yeah, I think that we all had to change everything in our job and life. But well, thanks to, I would say, technology, we are still able to be connected. So again, thanks to DR Wakefield to think about us and giving that opportunity to do that presentations. I wanted to make that presentations regarding Costa Rica using and trying to introduce our definitions as a country of sustainability. I think it's a word that everybody is using: sustainability, specialty, traceability. I mean, those have been very famous words recently in the industry. Fortunately, I think for our sector, but I think that from time to time we perhaps use it too fast, too quickly, and we definitely need to be aware that as, let's say, private companies, we can have a lot of laws, norms, rules regarding what sustainability is supposed to be for the company. But as producing country, I think that we still miss a clear and deep, no definition, but structure of the way of implementing that sustainability in the country. So if you can flip to the next slide, perhaps, Henry. I think that we just need to quickly make a quick definition of what the pillars of sustainability are supposed to be. So again, sustainability is anything that we want to be shared by the buyers. That's anything that there is no sustainability without any committed purchase or committed buyer. Buying a coffee just a year because the coffee is good is not sustainable in the long term. And the second point, obviously, is a fair distributions of the income along the chain. And that's perhaps one of the main challenge we have as industry. I mean, the roaster and the importer can pay a high, good FOB prices, but how can we give the guarantee that high FOB prices has been translated into a fair, good farm gate prices for the farmers? So that's what we are going to see mainly today. And obviously, thanks to those good incomes, we will be able to talk about a lower environmental impact, because at the end of the day, if farmers have no the possibility to finance what we pretend to implement as sustainable practices, let's say social or environmental practices. There is no way we can do that. We can all claim, I know that we have been hearing about child labors and incomes of pickers, and we can claim and sign papers, but if at the end of the day the farmers have not the possibility to finance all of what the certification program, for instance, wants us to do, it will be very hard for us to implement that. So going to the next slides, I think that Costa Rica is very well known, I think, as a country for social justice. It has been, I think, a medium class country for years. Unfortunately, I think the country has challenges as other countries to really respect that commitment, and we have more and more an equal, let's say, balance of incomes. But I think that the social welfare is working very well in Costa Rica, and it's very important when we talk about that COVID-19. We clearly see that the social and the hospitals systems, the healthcare system is working very well. So that's very important. Every producers or every inhabitants in Costa Rica has access to that public healthcare. We as a country have a minimum wage for pickers, which is perhaps the first point to introduce to mention in that presentations. Every picker is paid based on the minimum wages agreed by the Ministry of Work as well as the Coffee Institute. So there is no way you can pay less than what has been set up. This year, for the first year, the producer will cover migrant pickers. That means that the migrant pickers will have access to the Costa Rican social welfare too. That's anything I think very important, because we have been talking about that problems in our industry. I mean, how can we so pay fairly the migrant pickers? Pickers are mainly migrants, as we all know. But on the top of that, how they can have access to the social welfare if they need, being migrants, which is anything very problematic. And so the Costa Rican, the ICAFE has found an agreement to be able to finance that. And the fourth point that is also very important for us is that what we call here the let's say houses of happiness, Casa de la Alegría, who are basically a place, kind of kindergarten, where pickers can put their kids during the hours of picking. So that's also very, very difficult. A lot of pickers wants to have the kids with them. That's not so easy for parents to let their kids in a specific place during 6 hours while they are picking. So there is still a lot of work to do with that, but that's also very important as an industry to be able to take care of the kids, to give them activities that will be much different than what they could do, obviously, in a coffee plantation. So all of that, all of those points are anything totally integrated today into the Costa Rican coffee industry. I can flip, Henry, to the next slide. So again, talking about the environment after that, there is also anything very important that is not new in Costa Rica. I mean, Costa Rica, as also the Costa Rican coffee industry for years has been very careful regarding the environment in the coffee process mainly. So the first point was the use of water. That was anything that the industry at the beginning was a little bit reluctant to hear, and still I think that there is a lot of still arguments, fears about the fact that Costa Rica is not naturally fermented the coffees anymore. As you know, I mean, there is two ways of fermented coffees. The traditional one that we all know, meaning you put your coffee in a tank and you fill the tank with water. But that use of water is just massive. And when today we talk about double fermentations or triple fermentations, that's anything that is going totally at the opposite of environmental sustainability, because the amount of water you need to use to process the coffee that way is just massive. And Costa Rica decided years ago, roughly in the end of the 90s, to switch smoothly, but to new, let's say, technologies that will reduce the use of water, but basically also to try to lower the impact on the environment, because unfortunately, the more water you use, the more water you will need to clean at the end of the process. So we do have some numbers that say that water consumption in Costa Rica has dropped by almost 90% since 1990, which is very important. When, as you know, Costa Rican mills are mainly, or used to be, mainly medium to big centralized mills, meaning that in one single unit, you process a lot of coffee. So the use of water is just very high during the peak of the harvest. The second point, and obviously directly related to the water, is the pulp and water treatment. So as I mentioned, as the highest amount of water you use, unfortunately, you will need to treat that water. And I think it's very important to know that Costa Rica is very strict on that. A lot of other perhaps countries have no strict norms, and once you process the coffee, the water go directly to the river. That the way it used to be processed a long time ago here, the water was arriving clean on one side of the mill and getting out dirty on the other side. But fortunately, I mean, people took conscious of that. So since 1997, that's a law. Every mill, every plant must treat the water. And the Ministry of Health control the pH of the rivers around to be sure that the impact of the coffee processing is not negative, and that the water that is coming back to the rivers has been cleaned. Recently, so we used to use those oxidation lagoons. I think that the ones of you that have been traveling to origins remember that. Just remember the smell, and it's very easy to remember the oxidation lagoons. So roughly, generally, you had 3 lagoons that were supposed to clean that water into 3 different steps. So now we try to switch from those oxidation lagoons to what we call aspersions. That means that the dirty waters goes directly to a field with specific grass that we call star grass. That is a very thick grass that will absorb let's say that water, and so we can spray that water into back to the field instead of using those oxidation lagoons. And obviously, I think that every country now use the pulp into organic fertilizer. I think that almost 20 or 25 years ago, all of those sub-products were a big problem for the plants. And fortunately, now we know how to handle those sub-products. The CO2 emissions also. So Costa Rica wants to be carbon neutral by 2021. It's a very ambitious target. But the idea is to be able to reduce, as a coffee industry, the emissions by at least 37%, sorry. And we have a program called NAMA that has been implemented in most of the main mills in Costa Rica that looks to reduce the electricity, have a much adequate use of water, and obviously implement a sort of technological transitions to be much more efficient in the way we process coffee, and obviously in the way we contaminate the environment to be able to reduce as much as possible that. And the fourth point, and the most important, and that will be perhaps the biggest part of the second part of the presentations, the legislations. Every plant must be approved by the ICAFE and the Ministry of Health to be able to operate. You cannot open a processing plant in Costa Rica without those, let's say, those authorizations from the governments and the coffee institutes. As soon as you open a wet mill, you need to fulfill what we call the law 2762 implemented by the ICAFE. That is the law that will structure the whole coffee sector. So the day you open your mill, you need to respect that law. Obviously, there is frequent and regular controls from the Ministry of Work, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Environment, obviously tax office, to the plants that needs again to be operating according to the different law. And some of the mills have also been implementing the blue flags. That is also another certifications looking for sustainable practices. So you can flip to the other slide, Henry. So all of that is again controlled and regulated by the Coffee Institute of Costa Rica. The ICAFE is a very, very important actor for the Costa Rican coffee sector that is very unique in the world. And I think that that's I think important for me so to introduce what the coffee industry does today. So there were three basically objectives. So the first is investigations. We have regional offices everywhere in the country. If I'm not wrong, seven regions, so 7 offices. So the Coffee Institute is close from the farmers from those specific regions to give agronomical recommendations, to help farmers regarding varietals, productivity, trying to support diseases and pest controls, and obviously to assess the harvest. So if the ICAFE sees that there is a risk of, let's say, rust, for instance, in a specific regions, they send alerts. They are in touch with all of the local coffee farmers to give recommendations to prevent such increase of diseases. So the investigation has been very important. Obviously, regarding the varietals also, ICAFE has what we call CCAFE, that is a research center that together with the disease and pest control is here to support farmers in getting better varietals. The second point that we all know is the promotion ones. I'm not going to dig deeper into that. We all know that Café de Costa Rica has been doing, I think, a very good promotions regarding the regions, regarding the different programs, the blockchains that the ICAFE is actually implementing, and that the NAMA program that ICAFE is taking and is leading now. But the most important, and what we will talk about from now, is that famous Law 2762 that was voted in 1961. That's a long time ago. It's not new. I think that the law needs perhaps an update now because the market is very different, obviously. But that's anything totally unique. And the first and main perhaps aspect of that is that 80% of the A4B price comes back to the producers, and the ICAFE is the one that certified that numbers. It's not the private companies, it's not me that says where we 80% of the price come back to the farmers. That's the ICAFE that certifies that almost the main part of the A4B prices can come back to the farmers' hands, which is anything very important when we talk about sustainability. So the ICAFE controls the productions, export volumes. The A4B price is tracked regularly. We will talk about that later on. We will definitely, and I hope, understand after the presentation how that works. The processing and the administration's cost that the mills can discount from the final price to the farmers must be approved by the Coffee Institute. And obviously, the Coffee Institute represents the coffee sector over the government, etc. For instance, at the moment, the big issues we have with picking and the next, the COVID-19 consequences over migrants, workers is anything that the Coffee Institute obviously is handling. You can flip to the next one. So I mean, a lot of people that have been traveling to Costa Rica ask, obviously, how our pricing, it's a very particular pricing works. So I'm going to try to explain you how that pricing works. So first, the first price that is given to the producers the day of the harvest. I mean, so it's important for people to know that, for the ones that don't know, that we millers buy sherry. So the day the production is ready and is picked, the farmers deliver that day their sherry to a miller that will process the sherry from the beginning to the end. That means they will pulp, they will ferment, they will dry, and they will store the coffee till the delivery to the exporter. So we have very few intermediaries in Costa Rica, and the law 2762 set the relation between the farmers, the millers, and the exporters. So those are the three main. Obviously, the roasters are also part of the sector in Costa Rica, but the main actors regarding the pricing and the relation with farmers are those ones. So the day the mills will get the sherry from the farmers, they won't pay the coffee. They won't give a final price to the coffee that day. They will give what we call Adelanto, which is, I would traduce as a part of what the final price will be. So that Adelanto depends obviously on the quality. Depending on the area where you are, you will have a higher or lower price based on the quality of the coffee, the availability of the coffee, if there is a lot of coffee available or less coffee, international prices, differentials. So all of that will obviously interfere and will give the millers the possibility to set a price. So it's kind of competition among the millers, obviously. So one miller set a specific price and the others are supposed to be around that price, depending on their positions. They cannot be too far below, obviously too far higher that price. So all of the prices roughly are kind of the same. And after a few months, when most of the contract will have been fixed and registered to the Coffee Institute, the Coffee Institute will take all of those prices. That's why I was saying that the e-cafe was tracking the export prices. And so that will allow the millers to have, let's say, their export price average. So basically every contract, every export contract that the exporters have must be fixed to the Coffee Institute. So that A4B prices will be translated into an average for each and every miller, meaning every price, every contract will be tracked by the Coffee Institute. And the millers will be paid on what we call reales value, real value. So that's the A4B price, so the export price, minus the exporter fee, minus 1.5% of e-cafe tax, which is the way the e-cafe is financed, and $2.75 per 46 kilos to cover export cost. So when you take those values out of the A4B, you have what we call here reals price, which is the price that exporters pay to the mills. And based on that average, so the millers will be able to make what we call adjustment. That means after the harvest, when most of the coffee has been sold, shipped, and fixed, the millers have a much better understanding about what the final price will be, because the day they pay the Adelanto, there is a lot of unknown values, a lot of unknown uncertainty. If the price drops after the harvest and they paid a too high Adelanto, they can be on troubles, etc. So after a few months, they know what the average export price is. They have been beginning to ship the coffee, so they are in a much better cash flow positions. So they can take decisions to pay an adjustment. That means an extra value above the Adelanto that will be given to the farmers to help them basically to face the fertilizing time that happens most of the time end of April, May, June. So that's the way the farmers will get an extra amount of money to face those costs. And we have at the end of the year what we call the liquidations. The liquidations is the final price that the mills will pay to the farmers that will be set based on a matrix that the ICAFE has. That means that every plant will have to send administrations and processing costs to the Coffee Institutes to be approved. So once those costs are approved, the mills can discount those costs from the final price to the farmers. The ICAFE controls the yield for every plant. That means that the yields that the millers will report to the Coffee Institute must be in line with the yield that the Coffee Institute has been also sampling on their side. The Coffee Institute samples coffee to determine what the yield of each region has been. That will be able to help them at the end of the year to have a much better understanding about the yield per area. Also, the exchange rate must be approved by the Coffee Institute. As exporter, you cannot declare a specific exchange rate without, relation with let's say the reality. And so once those costs are approved, the miller is able to set the final price for the farmers that we call liquidation, and that price will be published into local newspaper. The website of ICAFEs, we will see that if you can flip, Henry, to the next slides. We will see that a little bit later on. Those numbers are public or through the local newspapers at the end of the year, or through the ICAFE website every day. So just to try to introduce perhaps better what I just said, I hope that my English is also clear enough to have people understanding. So the Adelanto, basically December, January. So I took an example of international prices of $100 New York, a differential for Costa Rican coffee of $80. That means that day the estimated A4B price would be 180. The reading is bearish, meaning that the forecast we have over what the market could do is negative. There is a risk of downside, of lower prices, and we have enough coffee, meaning that those will perhaps make millers very cautious into paying, I would say, instead of paying 80% of the potential A4B, they could eventually decide to pay only 60%, because again, the possibility to have the prices going down from 100 to 80 is for them possible. Those are just examples, and just to try to introduce the way we price coffee here. So they decide to pay an Adelanto that day based on a value of $180. That means that day, $108 will be the minimum price that the producers will be receiving. They won't be able to receive less. And the idea and the systems will allow the farmers to get higher prices if the export value is obviously higher than the one forecasted. So a few months after that, roughly in April, we have what we call adjustment. That means that 65, for instance, % of the sales have been fixed by the miller. They have an average of 195. There is still 35% to fix who are still at risk, but there is a good portion of the book that has already a price. So the miller decide to pay an extra $40 to the producers that day, because their export average allow us to pay an extra without making losses. And the liquidation in November, roughly, will allow to set the final price and calculate it. So if we take what we have been doing so far, the millers has been paying $108 as Adelanto and has added $40 as adjustment. That means that the price paid to the producers so far is $148. the final export price is 192. So based on international prices, outright sales, fixations, that's what the mills will obtain as an A4B value, export value. They have been sending the cost to the Coffee Institute that were approved and represent $33 that can be deduced from that 192, meaning that the final liquidation will be $159. So they will have to pay $11 extra to the farmers. So that's the way the pricing system works in Costa Rica, which gives to the Coffee Institutes a clear control over what everybody is doing. We can't buy coffee at X price because we want. We need to pay that coffee based into the real value of the coffee, the real commercial situations of the mills and the market that will again allow the farmer to get the optimum value of the coffee. You can flip, Henry. So that is an example of the export register from the Coffee Institute, which is public. You go to the website of the Coffee Institute. So we have obviously positive and negative comment of that, because giving too much information from time to time, unfortunately, is not so positive. Everybody knows what the other is doing, which can make some create some issues. We can't deny that. But that's the way it works. So if you have that, if you have a look on that PDF, so you have the different regions, in that case, Cotobruz and Los Santos. Los Santos is what people know as Tarrazu. And below that, you have all of those names, who are the names of every mills that is approved to mill coffee for those areas, okay? So you have a category of coffees. It depends. I mean, conventional can be usual coffees. Diferenciado can be a much better quality that will be paid differently. The production, the column production is the last 2 years harvest of that mill. And after that, you have unidades de 46 kilos. That means the amount of coffee that has been sold for export that day. So if we take the example of the first line, for instance, we have a production of 1,215 quintals. So here we call that fanegas of coffee. And out of that volumes, they sold 169.55 quintals of coffee. So that's a 79.60% of coffee sold. That's what we have on the other columns. And the one in between, the price, is so the realist price, the average realist price that those 169 quintals of coffee are receiving. So that the average price of those 169 coffee is $160.32. So those will be the price that the mills will use to set the final liquidations. So you can see that there is mills that have better price, lower price, that there is a lot of obviously things that happen to explain that when you had the possibility to fix, you fixed, the market was very good, the neighbor didn't do that, the market dropped. So again, you have all of those values. And after that, so you have columns for export coffees, and obviously the same for national consumptions. So you can flip to the next one. So those are the way that sheet is the way the Coffee Institutes track the A4B per every or the real price for every plant. And that one is the purchase registers, because we do also have access to the amount of coffee that each and every mill in Costa Rica has been able to get from the farmers. So in that specific case, the Coffee Institute is making a comparison versus the current harvest compared to the last harvest, to see if the mill is receiving less coffee or more coffee at the same period of time. So that report must to be updated every 15 days, that means that the mills must send their numbers to the Coffee Institute to have the Coffee Institute able to update that table. So again, the same, you have an average of the 2 harvests, and you have the amount of coffee received that crop, a percentage of the forecasted productions, and on the other side, the last year numbers to see if the meal and the harvest as a whole is better or lower than last year. So those again are public data that we use in our daily business. And to finalize, I hope I was not too long. Just a quick conclusion. If you can flip to the last one. So it's a very unique way of working. I think that we are very proud in Costa Rica to have the possibility to tell our buyers that the price they paid is definitely going back to the farmers. And if you have been traveling to Costa Rica, you have saw that there is no extreme poverty. We have challenges, obviously, but again, you are still proud to go to some farmers' places because you can see that they have a decent way of living. And I think that it's anything very important. Most of the time we want to help obviously the poorest, and we are all here to do that. But after years of doing that, if people have not been able to get out of some extreme poverty, that raises serious questions. We say that Costa Rica is very expensive. We do agree with that, but perhaps other countries are perhaps too cheap today. And when you sell an expensive product, your commitment is to tell people that you do the best you can regarding the social norms, environmental norms, and most important, the price that is coming back to the farmer's hands. So I think it was, for me, very important to explain what we do in Costa Rica. I hope, again, that you understood what I wanted to mention. And I'm seeing that there is some questions. So I don't know if Henry, you wants to make some questions or comments, hoping again that the presentation was clear enough.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sébastien. That was absolutely fascinating. I don't know if Sébastien, if you could see that the question that you posed, I said to our attendees, would you pay the same price for an expensive natural coffee from Costa Rica compared to an Ethiopian natural expensive coffee? I just thought it was interesting because you mentioned at the end about pricing, and about 62% of the attendees gave an answer, and 75% said yes, and 25% said no. So I actually thought that was quite a high turnout.
Yep.
In terms of
and it's an interesting and very important answer for us right now, because again, with the crisis we have, I mean, the crisis definitely hit very hardly the microlot segment. I think everywhere, not only in Costa Rica, but the microlot segment were hardly hit. And one of the questions we have for the next months is, will the pricing of Costa Rican microlots be the same? Will the roasters will be tougher regarding the way they will obviously pay coffees because the tough situation they are in. So that's important, because we know that the price for natural coffees out of Costa Rica are pretty expensive. We always have a reference as other perhaps Central American countries, and obviously Ethiopia, that is the country for natural processes. So yeah, it's an interesting survey.
Yeah,
and positive answer for us.
I think so. Yeah, I thought a very important fact that you mentioned was about migrant pickers and their inclusion into sort of social network framework in the law in Costa Rica. How did that come about? Because that's something which I think is pertinent to many industries, especially in Europe as well. I mean, in the UK, we employ a lot of fruit pickers from Eastern Europe, for example, and luckily, because of the European Union, they all have access to the same laws and regulations. But in the coffee world, as you mentioned, often in Central America, you have migrant pickers moving up and down through different countries, and quite often they're not, they don't have access to any benefits or laws to protect them. So is Costa Rica the first Central American country to introduce laws for migrant pickers, and how did that come about?
I would say, again, we just need to be very careful, because I don't want to say, yes, Costa Rica, we are the only ones and the rest is not. But we clearly have a country. I think we can compare Costa Rica in the coffee industry as UK or France or in other sectors. That means that there is a lot of cost, because our employees are paid higher than other countries, because the benefits that employees are receiving are also higher, because the taxes that companies are paying are more expensive, and obviously because the country as itself is much more expensive. You travel to Costa Rica, and most of the time you can have prices perhaps even lower in Europe. So first, that's an important component of the final price. Again, the norms are very tough in Costa Rica. You cannot operate illegally, I would say. You cannot operate without respecting the law, and the law is tough, and which is good, because you need to do the right things. You cannot send your pulp back to the river. You cannot send your dirty waters back to the river. You cannot pay badly or unfairly some pickers or some producers, even less if you pocket very high A4B prices. So I think that we are all in that chain as an industry. We all need to make business. I'm not gonna say that contrary, but we just need to be, I think, fair if we want our industry to be sustainable. And one of the main points today regarding migrants, and we are facing that as Costa Rica, we need migrants to pick coffees in Costa Rica, because we know at the moment there is a very heavy campaign in Costa Rica to have access to local pickers, because there is a lot of employment. So technically speaking, there is a lot of people, Costa Rican, able to pick coffee. But we clearly know that those people won't accept to pick coffee. I mean, it's not so easy to be touristic guide or waitress in a restaurant on Monday and pick coffee on Friday. I mean, it's a huge switch, and there is so that resistance that I mean, you used to be employed in a call center. You know, you went to work at 8 a.m., had a desk, you are on the roof, you leave at 5. You have a, let's say, desktop job during the whole day, or computerized job during the whole day. You need to make a 10 minutes pause to smoke your cigarette or have a coffee, you leave. I mean, that's totally different than agricultural conditions, where you need to be at 6 a.m. in a coffee plantations. It can rain, it can be hot, you have bugs. I mean, it's not easy to pick coffee. And the second point is, if you find local labor force, will those pickers be able to pick the same quality of coffee that migrants that have been picking that coffee for years? We need ripe cherries. We don't need sherry in the basket. We need only ripe cherries. And when you pick coffee for the first time, you just realize how tough it is to pick the right cherry. It's very easy to put a photo on Instagram with a small basket full of perfect cherry, but go and pick that in the coffee field, and you will see that it's not so easy. On the top of that, you are paid based on the yield, so you need to fill a specific volume of coffee at the end of the day to be paid. So the lower sherry you will be able to pick in a tree, the lower yield, or the slowest your picking will be. So those are challenges that put us into a very, very complex situation toward the next harvest. We still have some months forwards. Some regions will pick first. Those regions will perhaps be able to find a little bit more, perhaps local pickers, because they are more on the countryside. I'm a little bit more worried with the Central Valley, obviously, the coffee that will have to be picked on the Central Valley, because most of the people that lost their job were working on hotels, on restaurants, on tourism, on call centers, on stores, and those people are not going to go to a coffee farm so easily to pick coffee tomorrow.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think that, yeah, those skills aren't that transferable. So I mean, it's quite lucky in a way that coronavirus didn't happen during the picking. And actually,
for us, yeah,
got a question from Tom Bennett from Australia, who was asked, do you think ICAFE will have to implement any significant changes because of COVID-19 to ensure Costa Rica can retain its mantle as the most sustainable origin?
Well, that's a good question, and they had to. They had to, because we have to be. I mean, the pricing policy was very tough and strict. You can't discount a coffee after its registration so easily. You can cancel contract after its registration so easily. And obviously, mainly regarding the microlots, the ICAFE had to flexibilize a lot the pricing policy, because a lot of exporters had to discount some very expensive prices, not by a lot, but we had to because of the situations. So the Coffee Institute had to begin in flexibilizing that. The Coffee Institute is heavily, let's say, acting towards the labor force, because that's up to now the main worry that we have as coffee sector. I would think that the law needs to be updated today. We still find some, I think, areas where the market condition, today's market conditions are so different than many years ago, that yes, the coffee, and I think that Sinia is very proactive. She understands, she is the managing director or the executive director of the ICAFE. She understands very well the industry. So I would be confident, because if you see the industry in Costa Rica, the amount now of micro mills, we have less and less producers, and we have more and more millers, because the millers are milling small now amount of coffees, and obviously the law must be needs to be updated. So it's not only because of COVID-19, it's just because of the way the market has been changing during the recent years. But yes, regarding the COVID-19, there is a lot of talks that needs to be set up, because one of the main challenge that we will face is that the Coffee Institute set you some minimum prices to allow you to register contract. So, for instance, today ICAFE can consider that the minimum differential for Costa Rican coffee is 100 over. And how can you price next year? It's almost impossible. It's very hard. So if you are a buyer that wants to buy Costa Rican coffee for next year delivery, you are perhaps not going to pay a so high price today because of so much uncertainty you have in front of you. So let's say you're going to say, okay, well, I can bid you 80 over. Okay, Colombia is at 60. I'm going to give you 20, and it's example. But if you, as exporter, present that contract today to the Coffee Institute, that contract could be denied, because the Coffee Institute will say, no, you are telling me that you want to register that coffee at 100 over, but the market says that the price for Costa Rican coffee is 100 over. So we can't give you the possibility to register that coffee. So that happens, unfortunately. And so those were part of the problems we had from time to time, because again, giving a price 1 year prior is different to giving a price for the next month. I mean, you can price easier the next month's let's say delivery than a delivery that you will take in a year. So I think that regarding the COVID-19, that's perhaps what also the ICAFE will have to flexibilize a little bit, trying to trust perhaps a little bit more from time to time that the exporters needs and the importers needs a little bit more oxygens and flexible rules to price next crop coffee, because if not, we are gonna, I mean, I don't know when we are gonna sell coffee for next year if the ICAFE denies us each and every contract we will present them.
Yeah, it's tricky because on the one hand you're trying to get some long-term commitments from your customers, and on the other hand, you know, as you said, like, it's very difficult to know where the market's going to go. But for me, what I find really interesting about what you've mentioned is how key ICAFE is in Costa Rica coffee production, because it seems like they're controlling every single step, and they've crafted this. Well, I know it's got its negatives as well, but this very sustainable pricing structure, which, you know, allows a very high percentage of the FOB price to go back to the producer. And I think I wrote down that, I think you said in 1961 there was a law that the ICAFE established that rule. And do you think, like, in Costa Rica, like, what made the ICAFE so powerful? What was the drive to create ICAFE? And like, are they 100% linked to the government? How independent are they as an institution?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we also, I mean, again, as you mentioned, you have, obviously, it's not all positive. From time to time, too much controls is also too much. We just have to admit that. But at the end of the day, that's for a positive result. The point is, the Costa Rica is an independent organism, so the government has a seat into the board of directors. However, and that's anything very important, because we see that in other institutions, unfortunately, a government change is a change of the executive directors. And for me, there is absolutely no relation between the government in place and the coffee sector. The coffee sector must totally act as an independent entity. So it's not stable and it's not sustainable when you have every 4 years a person with different ideas that has been sent from the political parties. Unfortunately, I have to say that politics most of the time is not efficient in the day-to-day business. I mean, we don't need politicians driven at the Coffee Institute. We need technicians. We need people that understands about what we talk about, what the green coffee industry is, how our industry works, to make efficient laws for the coffee industry. So in Costa Rica, there is every year a board. I'm losing my Spanish, and Congreso. That's a congress, the coffee producers, or the coffee congress. So you will have roasters, exporters, millers, and producers that will be represented into that congress, that will elect people that will represent them to the coffee institutes, that will allow seats to exporters, roasters, producers, millers, together with the government. So the government is one seat. Obviously, perhaps it's louder than perhaps others, but it's one seat. And the other of the seats are basically managed by people that works into the coffee industry. And I think that is why the coffee industry has been very, I think, pragmatic, very efficient, but also has known what kind of services they were supposed to address to the coffee farmers, because that's clearly an entity that is here to serve the coffee sector, not the politicals above. There is no, I mean, the budget from the coffee institutes come from the export. As I mentioned, 1.5% of the prices that we register to the coffee institute is paid to the coffee institute. Without that payment, we cannot export. So meaning we have an export pending, we pay the coffee institute, and as when we pay, we will be allowed to export that coffee. So that's the way the coffee institute is financed. Obviously, that will depend on the amount of coffee produced and the international prices, since that's a percentage We have been going down in production for years, so that's potential less money. And obviously, the international prices are not as good as they used to be. But that's the way the e-cafe will be financed, which is also independent. It's not directly from time to time money that comes from the government or from other entities. And obviously, there is no way you can finance political party using the money from the coffee institutes. So that's I think positive at the end of the day.
So are you going to be joining e-cafe anytime soon to the board of directors?
It's not my no. I mean, we have good people, yeah, that do a good job for all of us. That's I will let them meet themselves. And no, it's very, I think we are very proud of all of that. I think it's a very educated industry in its way of really trying to set up anything pretty strong from the base to the top. After years, I mean, we all work in coffee for years. I'm still very tired, I would say, and disappointed to travel to some countries where you can clearly see that there is no coffee sector structured. It's just everybody for itself, for its own. There is no support. There is no policy, national policy or efficient policy. I mean, and we still go and travel to places in 2020 where you see conditions that, I mean, are really alarming for you as human being. You know, you travel a year and a half for two weeks in some origins, and you are just tired to see that poverty on the ground. So it's not only because of coffee. I mean, it's a much, and again, I mean, all of those topics about child labors, it's not only coffee. It's totally, I mean, it's bigger. It's nationals, it's educations, it's corruptions, it's I mean, it's a lot of things that the coffee industry by itself cannot solve just because you are committed to avoid child labor, for instance. But I think that if we have an organism that can clearly control, as I mean, on the, I mean, with the most, I would say, transparent and constructive background, that will definitely help people. Because again, if you are not controlled, it's a little bit like a teenager, you know. I mean, if you can do anything you want, I mean you're 15, you know that you are doing things that are not good for you, you know. It's perhaps a silly comparison, but again, we need to be, unfortunately, to be controlled. We need to have people that say, hey, you should not do that, you can do that, okay, yes you can, or you can do that, but doing that and that, and into those parameters, I think that as an industry you can live, you can move on, you can have everybody participating, everybody grabbing added value from our business, and if we really want, again, to talk about sustainability and be all here and healthy as industry in 2040, I mean, everybody must be okay in that business, because one day we will suffer from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think again it goes back to that central role of e-cafe and how they actually crafted this structure. And if you look at other associations like the FNC or Anacafe, you know, some have more, or well, I wouldn't say any of them are more successful than e-cafe, but some have more success than others. And other sort of structures are not, they're there in name, but they're not really there in practice. And I wonder if, you know, if e-cafe could spread some of that knowledge to other countries, because it just seems to be such a, you know, like a robust network. I mean, I wrote down a couple of dates in your presentation, and said there was a water law in 1997. I mean, I went to Honduras 18 months ago, and they were very proud about their clean water project, and it was great because there's been a lot of progress in the last 2 years. But you know, in some instances, some of the neighbouring origins are decades behind in their environmental and social legislation. So I wonder if, I mean, one day e-cafe might export some of that knowledge to other countries, because it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did. It's not anything new. The point is, you have a lot of powerful lobby behind, and opposite interest. I mean, we just need to be honest with that. If you are too much controls, that means that some won't be able to do the money they want to do, or to finance things that you are not supposed to do with coffee, and everybody will after that make their own conclusions on that. So you need definitely to have, I think, a political willingness behind that. It's a little bit like, again, I like to do parallels, but a little bit like when you want to smoke, to stop smoking, if you really want to stop smoking, you should be able to stop smoking one day. But if you want to stop smoking because it's bad for your health, so because your kids or wife tells you to stop smoking, that's going to be a little bit harder. So you just need to be convinced. And that kind of it's I mean, for some countries, it's a huge revolution to do that. And that's why I'm not so optimistic with others. You have so much interest, as we said, in Costa Rica, it's also possible because we have systems that reduce the amount of intermediaries. Okay, we do not have intermediaries in Costa Rica. I mean, the producers has the harvest available, ready. He needs to deliver that sherry that day to the miller. And the miller is in charge of all of the process. And after that, you need to find an exporter. And most of the time in Costa Rica, the exporter is exactly the same than the miller. So you have almost nobody in between that can fight that systems, because it's going against their own interest. But obviously, the amount of money that you're able to do as an exporter is limited. I mean, we are all controlled at the end of the year by the Coffee Institute. I mean, we are audited. We need to present our numbers, say, okay, what's the amount of coffee you invoiced, and what is the amount of price you paid? Because we need to be inside a margin that the Coffee Institute allow us as exporter to be able to operate. So we need to show commercial invoices. We need to show our purchases contract and our cost also too. And the cafe will say, okay, well, you make too much money. You need to give that back to the millers. So it's also creating some complex, I would say, situations regarding a business standpoint, because yes, some need, and in the case of micros, we need higher margins to really operate. I mean, our costing structure is totally different from conventional coffees. But so I'm sure that the Coffee Institute share that with others. The point is, do we have the systems in each and every country to do that? Because I would say Costa Rica is roughly the same than El Salvador. So Salvador could do, I mean, we have the same industry, coffee structure, processing unit. But after that, you have a lot of things that are not so easy to fix.
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, you touched on it earlier about saying that, you buy cherry. So obviously a lot of other countries, they'll buy parchment predominantly. So that's quite a big difference there.
It is.
But Sebas, I think we've run out of time today. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for such an interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our attendees enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. And I would say as well, before coronavirus, we identified a project, it's a beekeeping project in Peru that we want to support as part of Cafe Femenino and Full Circle. So if you're an attendee and you're able to, any donation is welcome, but we understand during these times it's quite unlikely, but the link is on our website. We've got our last talk tomorrow, which is from Maxwell Colonna-Dashwood on innovation in coffee. And that will wrap up this week of webinars. So thank you all for attending. Thank you very much, Sebas, for your talk.
Oh, thanks to you.
We will see you all soon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Be all safe, and we will be stronger after that one.
See you soon, Sebas.
Okay. Bye. Bye all.